Hey everybody, it's Eric Pappenfoos. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day, and we are coming to you from Cooperstown, New York, where I am on a book buying trip in honor of my birthday. And what's interesting about Cooperstown is this is where the Susquehanna River originates and goes 444 miles, all on its way through Harrisburg to the Chesapeake Bay. Come on with me, I want to show you the books I found. We've been to two bookstores, one in Cooperstown called Willis Money, which specializes in Americana, and another in Smithville Flats in between Binghamton and Cooperstown, which is owned by Phil Monteleone. And I want to give him a shout out because Phil has his own YouTube channel under The Book Peddler. So check it out, it's a lot of fun. He does similar to this. He shows a lot of things about the day in the life of running a used bookstore. But since we're in Cooperstown, I kept finding Cooperstown imprints, and I want to start with those today. So let's get right to it and dig in to these exciting new arrivals. Now, in Cooperstown, first at the Book Peddler, we found a whole bunch of books that were published by H&E, Henry and Eli Finney. And this book is interesting because it was published in Otsego in 1811, which is the name of the lake behind us that feeds the Susquehanna River. And Otsego is what becomes Cooperstown in 1812. So this is one of the last books published before the name change to the village of Cooperstown. It was named after William Cooper, who was a judge and who happened to be the father of James Fenimore Cooper. What I like about this book by the Finneys is it is in a very early homemade dust jacket. Look at that, isn't that incredible? It's hand stitched, it's made out of leather, and it's probably the oldest dust jacket we have in our collection and one of the oldest American dust jackets that I've seen, and I'm sure this dates to the time of the book's publication in 1811. But for the most part, the Finneys published standard fare books like this wonderful little history of America. You can come right in and zoom in. There, published in Cooperstown in 1842, or some good frontier history like this really cool Life of Black Hawk, also published by Finney in 1842. Now, Henry Finney marries James Fenimore Cooper's daughter, and they also published Cooper. And perhaps the best book we found that was published in Cooperstown is a copy of James Fenimore Cooper's The American Democrat, also published by Finney, also published right here in Cooperstown, New York. Now, the Finneys are fascinating because they were the first publishers to invent the book boat. Now, you've heard about the bookmobile and you've probably seen book carriages, but they had a book boat, which meant that they sold books all the way up and down the Erie Canal from Cooperstown all the way to Buffalo, stopping at various places and peddling their books. And the books, as we just saw, were pretty generic, simple books that were inexpensive. But I'd never heard of a book boat before, and it was done by the Finneys. I'll also note this book has a little bit of water damage, so maybe it got a little bit too close to the Erie Canal as somebody was buying it for just a small amount of money. The other interesting thing about the Finneys, and I learned this when researching them, is that they, in back of their printing press, had a cow pasture. And the cow pasture was where a gentleman at the same time named Abner Doubleday decided he would play a game called baseball. And Doubleday played it in the Finneys cow pasture in 1839, about the same time this book was published. And that is why the Baseball Hall of Fame is in Cooperstown, New York, because that was considered the invention of baseball. Now, we know today that wasn't the first game of baseball, but that game of baseball is documented, and it was on the Finneys estate. The other amazing book that we found on this trip to Cooperstown, New York, also came from Phil, is a copy of Peter Pindar's poems. And this is a beautiful early American binding from 1792. You can see the rope work on the binding. It's just lovely. This is restored and this is original, so you can compare the two. Now, I have to tell you a personal story about this because I was amazed at what I found when I opened this book up. Peter Pindar was a satirist. He made fun of people. If you read this book, you'll see his ode to kings, in which he made fun of George III. He made fun of Samuel Johnson. He made fun of people with high pretensions. And in addition to doing that, he also really loved to make fun of the Royal Academy, which were portrait painters. And he was friends with John Opie, who was a young portrait painter, and they made fun of all the old stodgy portrait painters. And there's an awful lot of this in here. And if you know me, you know that I collect portraits and I love old portraits. You know, I love Thomas Selly American portraits, but I also love British portraits from the period. And it just so happens that above our bed in Harrisburg, we have a portrait of a ship captain named Benjamin Beale. And it was published by one of these Royal Academy painted by one of these Royal Academy exhibitors named Richard Caddick back in the 1770s. And it was amazing because when we opened up the book, look who the owner of the book was. The owner of the book was Benjamin Beale.
Whoa.
And Benjamin Beale, the ship captain, was from Massachusetts, went to Liverpool where he had his portrait painted, earned his fortune in the mercantile trade, wanted to come back to America, but got stuck there during the American Revolution. It doesn't come back to America until after the American Revolution, where he becomes neighbors with John Adams. And his house is actually still owned today by the National Park Service. It's part of the Adams Historic Site, Beale's house. Now, we knew that his portrait had been in the library, and we knew that the family sold all the belongings to the house in the 1920s, but we had no idea that there were books of Benjamin Beale's. And here was this wonderful book of Benjamin Beale that we found. Also, I don't know what Benjamin Beale thought of Peter Pindar, because there are no notes in here, but I do know that John Adams loved Pindar, and he would quote him back and forth with John Quincy and his other children, giving him morals of the day. Obviously, this anti-reverential, satirical dialogue really appealed to the American founding fathers. Peter Pindar, owned by Captain Benjamin Beale. I want to end today with a really funny book, one that we also found very recently on our travels, and it's Chisenbop, The Finger Calculation Method. And I bet you didn't realize you need an entire book just to explain how to count on your fingers, but you do. And this was a book in the 1960s, a real phase that people started counting with your fingers. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you could do fractions of 10 with your other, and it was a big thing. But what I liked about this book was not just that it taught you how to count with your fingers, but it has one of the best blurbs ever on the back of a book, which is, publishers always put blurbs on the back of books to try and sell the books. And the blurb on the back of this book was, "It's better than an abacus." So that's our funny book for this week. We've had a lot of fun up here in Cooperstown, New York. I'll be back next Friday and every Friday with another edition of Buy Day.